All right, look, this chapter is all about groups, but I want to remind you of a couple things as we're getting into groups. Earlier in the year, I told you specifically there are three principles that are relating to government and politics, and that everything relates to money except money itself, and that's about power. And then power has to be fragmented. And you look back at last chapter, remember, ultimately, the federal government, what's one of the things they hang over states' heads to get them to do things? Grant money, okay? And they're saying, hey, you don't have to do this, but if you want to do it, here's the reason why. And so it's like, hey, if you want to get things done in your state, you have to accept that federal money. And the federal government says, we're more than happy to give you money, but it's to manipulate you, to get you to do the things they want you to do. And we break up power. Remember, the national government has certain powers, and so does the states. Everything relates back to those principles. Mia, what are you laughing at?
Just made eye contact with Abaya eating ice
If you're at home, you just missed out on something really great. All right. Now, moving right along, okay? Remember those three principles. Everything does relate to money and manipulation and power, and what a time to be alive. All right, look, the next couple chapters are going over what we call linkage institutions. And linkage institutions are anything that links the government and the people together. Okay? Linkage institutions are anything that links the government to people, letting them know how they feel about one another. Yes, it is a good idea. Because remember, ultimately, who's responsible for selecting members of the government? The people. And who's responsible for good government? The government itself. So people in the government have to communicate, and these linkage institutions help them do that. Okay? That's the job of linkage institutions, to help communicate, bridge the communication gap. All right? And there are four linkage institutions. First one, political parties. Citizens make up political parties, and members of political parties get elected to office, and they're able to take actions or to not take certain actions. You all likely registered with a political party when you registered to vote. Kaiser, are you registered to vote? Did you register with a party or did you go independent? Wow. Anybody register with a party? What did you register as prior? Do you want to tell us?
cream. I registered as a Democrat.
Okay. You're like, I'm okay to admit that.
Yeah.
All right. And you're not obligated to vote for anybody, but most people tend to go with one party or the other in terms of registering to vote. Right?
But when you register like with a party, can you go against your party and vote for them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't have to vote. You're not beholden to vote for them.
Like say you're a Democrat, but like you like what Trump does, like you can
Yeah,
go
you
with
feel
Trump.
free to vote for
What
him.
about in primaries?
Primary is a little different, and we'll talk about that later, but there is some crossover depending on what state you're allowed in. Political parties, one linkage institution. The second, media. They report on what the government's doing, and they also report on how the people feel about that and how the people are affected by those policies. So, like, for example, let's say that in Oregon, the journal question we were talking about today, let's say they decriminalize all drugs. The media is going to report on how that effort is going along. All right. And the government's going to take notice, and so is the people. All right. So the people are like, either we made a big mistake or we have a resounding success, or maybe it just needs tweaked a little bit. Okay. The media has a role to play in linking the government people and acting as like that bridge of communication. Okay. Third one, you're going to experience tomorrow voting or elections. That's the third linkage institution. Okay. Voting or elections. You better believe that when people vote tomorrow, they're expressing how they feel about our current government at the state and national level. At the national level, it's like a giant referendum on Donald Trump, whether or not you think he's doing a good job or a bad job. All right. And so people are saying, look, if they overwhelmingly, like, let's just say, for instance, that the House of Representatives, there are way more Democrats than Republicans. The Senate flips and it's a majority of Democrats, and Joe Biden wins the presidency. What is America communicating by saying that? What types of policies do they prefer? More liberal ones. Okay. We want to see changes. If they were to go all Republican, you see Republicans gain seats in the House and Senate, and Trump wins the presidency. People are like, let's stay on a more conservative course. All right. Last but not least, what this chapter is all about: group activity, interest groups. There are groups that are interesting. Of all of these, I think probably the interest groups, the ones you probably know the least about. Great question. That is a perfect segue. It's like, what are these? What is an interest group? Anybody want to field that one? Ah, not a bad guess. All right. But here's the one thing you left out. Okay. Interest groups are groups of like minded people who want to affect government or policy. Groups of like minded people who want to affect government or policy. Our policies mean like our laws, our ways of doing things. Any type of group of like minded people who want to affect government or policy. Can you think of an example of an interest group? What's a group of like minded people who want to affect government or policy? How about this? You ever heard of a group called the National Rifle Association? Tama just rolled her eyes. What is their issue? What type of issues do they want to affect in government? Guns, gun rights. They are pro gun rights. How about this one? The American Federation of Teachers. What do American Federation of Teachers, what do we care about? Not always. It's like all poodles are dogs, but not all dogs are poodles. All unions are interest groups, but not all interest groups are unions. Make sense? Okay. Now, look, unions, for example, teacher unions, what types of policies are we trying to change? Education policies. Okay. Now, let me show you a couple of other things here, and we'll mention a few more things before we get out of here. Okay. Look at these people right here. What are these people doing in this picture? They're literally hugging trees. But look, people don't just do that for fun, do they? They just shimmy up a tree and just hang out there? No. Why are these people doing this? Because as a protest, what are they protesting? Cutting down the trees. They don't like environmental policies that allow trees to get cut down. Okay? And as a result, like here's an example of an interest group. Okay? The Sierra Club. They're a popular environmental group. By the way, on the AP exam, they're not going to ask you like to match up the interest group with, whatever else. It's like they don't expect you to memorize a list of interest groups, but you should be able to recognize one when you see it. Okay? Sure. Black Lives Matter would definitely qualify because they want to affect government policy. That's a good example. Right. You don't have to necessarily be a member. You can support the group from afar and still benefit from what they do. All right. Let me give you one more example. All right. This one you don't, it's just made me laugh because of the picture. These women are at Augusta National Golf Course where up until 2013, women weren't allowed to play at Augusta National. It was a private golf course for men. And you see them holding up different signs, but this one guy in the back is holding up the sign that says iron my shirt. I'm like, wow, rude. Why do women feel the need to hold up signs for that? Hey, let me reframe that. Have women ever been the victims of bad government policy? Give me an example. There's a whole slew of them. Not having the right to vote. And so what did women have to do? They had to not just protest, but organize and take activity. Groups like now, the National Organization for Women became a thing. What do we want? Equality. When do we want it? Yeah, there's like a few women that responded here. All right. Look, here's the one thing. Listen, before we leave, get this. What's the danger of interest groups? Okay. There's a danger in that. For example, what do the National Organization of Women, what do they care about? Women and their issues. What do they not care about? That too. All right. National Rifle Association. What do they care about? Guns. Everything else is secondary to them. Okay. And here's the danger of interest groups. They have their issues as their primary focus and not the whole group. Okay. Here's a good example. Newtown, Connecticut, 2011. 26 elementary kids, kindergartners and first graders get shot and killed. And is there any change to gun policy? No. Why is that? The NRA. We'll pick up with that a little bit on Wednesday.